So good to be with you. My name is Reverend Anya Sandler Michael, she, her, hers. Welcome to our forum, Community Voices, Community Needs, organized by Montclair Beyond Policing. So I'll tell you just a little bit about myself first. I'm senior co-minister at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation at Montclair. Our mission is to come together to nurture souls, inspire hope, and bring into being a more just and loving world. And today at our congregation's annual meeting, we voted to adopt what we call the eighth principle of Unitarian Universalism, a principle which commits us to undoing racism and white supremacy. It is so good to be here with Montclair Beyond Policing because I know they are committed to that good work as well. And we acknowledge as we begin, and we honor that Montclair is located on the ancestral lands of the still living, still sovereign Lenape peoples, communities, and nation. We recognize as well the many and diverse Native American indigenous peoples who call this region home, past, present, and future. And we acknowledge these same ancient, alive, and biodiverse lands have been the site of colonial violence and occupation, dispossessing, enslaving, and impacting the lives of all to this very day. Will you pause with me for one moment to recognize that truth and to breathe together, to breathe in and to breathe out? Grounded in this truth, we come together for our work. The purpose of this forum is to lift up some of the many community members and organizations who are building safety and well-being from the ground up. We will hear from Restorative Justice Montclair, David Corfidge, climate activist, New Jersey Harm Reduction Coalition, Friends of the Bellevue Avenue Library, Montclair Mutual Aid, Brick City Mutual Aid, and Montclair Beyond Policing. Our speakers today represent a range of beliefs about the role of policing and Montclair's police budget, and some will not address policing at all, but will offer us a vision and practical guidelines for taking care of each other within community and without causing harm. After our presentations, you will all have the opportunity to join breakout discussions with our presenters. I'd like to acknowledge that we are recording the presentations, but we will not be recording the breakout discussions. I welcome you as you are moved to introduce yourself by writing your name into the chat and any organization, if you wish, that you represent. And I welcome you as we continue to please use the chat if you have clarifying questions that you would like to ask, or if there are resources that you would like to request, or if there's a shout out, an amen, a grateful that you would like to share with all who are gathered, please use that space for your praise and your acknowledgement as well. As our names start to gather in the chat, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. First with us today is Gail Shepard from Restorative Justice Montclair. Gail, she, her, hers, is a 24-year veteran, employee of the Montclair Public School District. She's a certified social worker and special education teacher, and she spent 2 terms as president of the Montclair Education Association. Gail is currently the coordinator for Restorative Justice Montclair and has helped facilitate the Restorative Justice Circle training of more than 100 educators, students, and community members. Gail is a long-term Montclair resident and the mother of 2 children, both of whom graduated through the Montclair school system. Gail, thank you so much for being with us and presenting today.
And thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Sunday on this very beautiful, hot Sunday that requires us to have our air conditioners on and our pockets ready for the cost to that. So good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for allowing me to place the voice of Restorative Justice Montclair into this conversation regarding beyond policing. I'm sharing from my heart. The teachers on special assignment who participate in restorative justice in Montclair, we have our some very sincere belief in terms of how policing is handled and how it relates to restorative justice. So I hope my words are helpful and edifying in some way. So Restorative Justice Montclair believes that if in fact we're in a relationship with each other, we're less likely to cause harm. And as educators, we are invested in ensuring that we teach and train by modeling students in restorative justice how to indeed not cause harm. So once we begin to develop relationships, we believe sincerely that we're less likely to cause harm. So restorative justice is a district-wide culture change. It moves us from a punitive response to behavior to a relational one. Gone are the days where we use a punitive power over model to command respect. And when I say power over, I believe that there are two very distinct ways that we communicate and we function. Either we function where we have power over another person or we have power with. So in restorative justice, we believe that the goal is to have power with, regardless of the age, regardless, relationships are drawn and empowered when we have power with someone and someone doesn't have power over. When it's power over or power over model, we're trying to demand respect from another person as opposed to commanding it by way of the relationship. So our goal should be to move as a district, and I'm speaking specifically to the Montclair Board of Education, our district in my approach. Our goal should be to remove any obstacles that don't support a shift in culture that affirms a model of restoration in our district. Restorative justice requires a full district participation and buy-in from the top. If the district allows law enforcement, and I use those words very specifically, not policing, but law enforcement. So if the district allows law enforcement to perpetuate a punitive mindset, then we have to ask ourselves if we have any interest to in fact be restorative. And I want to move policing simply from looking at a badge and seeing a police officer to the different forms and ways that policing is perpetuated in education. So I'm going a little bit further than the uniform. So law enforcement or policing clearly defines a power over approach in education. So the question that it begs is, how is it perpetuated, whether or not it's in our district or wherever? So let's just talk about a way policing is perpetuated in a power over position in Montclair. And I speak specifically now to Montclair High School because that's where I am now assigned. And that's where the restorative justice, I guess the hub or the headquarters is. So when you come into Montclair and you come into the high school, everybody is somewhat familiar with the rounder. Am I correct? By Montclair High School. When you come into the rounder at Montclair High School on any given day, the first thing you see when a student enters the rounder coming into school in the morning is a police vehicle. So if the first thing you see is a police vehicle, what is the message that we're giving students? We can identify the police officer by uniform, even though it's a dressed down uniform, but the police vehicle sends a message to the entire community right away. Now, where my concern comes in is you can't identify school counselors. Their cars don't have a position in the rounder. You can't identify social workers. Their cars don't have a specific position in the rounder. So what is the message that we're sending to not just students, but anyone who comes into that high school? Because if the first thing that we see is a police vehicle, then we see a power over position that we're taking. And I want to make sure that I communicate that I'm more concerned with relationships than anything else when I discuss enforcement or law enforcement. Because relationship says that, again, if we're in relationship, we're less likely to cause harm. But if we're showing, or if we're providing a model that says we are the power, and if there's a problem, you have to address the power simply by virtue of the vehicle. And if the vehicle is there because of a crisis and for crisis measures, then I would wonder why we don't see a fire truck too. Because if the goal is to have it present for crisis, then any crisis vehicle should be present. Am I correct? Unless we're giving a message by the vehicle. All right, I think I made that point enough. So again, we see that police vehicle, and then I want to make sure that we understand, and I heard something about resources of finances, so I want to make sure that we understand that the policing that is done in the district, or the police officer that is at the high school, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, it may have changed, is being funded by the Board of Education, not the Montclair Police. So I also want to say that we want to make sure that our relationships are clean and pure, so that I would say in a pandemic, we want to make sure that we have mental health coordinators and that we have every position possible beyond policing. And if in fact we want to develop rapport and relationship, and restorative justice is our goal, then we have to see and identify all of the support persons who are available to meet the social, emotional, and relational needs of every student in the district, because our messaging has to honor our beliefs. And I just want to end by saying students become victims of someone else's power when we don't allow for relationships to grow and establish, but we define relationships through power. This kind of power doesn't educate nor empower youngsters to develop relationships and self-control. The very opposite happens. The very opposite of restoration happens when a student is not allowed and given the opportunity to develop relationships and self-control on their own, but it's done for them by a power method. And this method of power is actually the very opposite of what we're interested in presenting through Restorative Justice Montclair, because it is indeed not restorative. Oh, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gail Shepard. I saw a couple rounds of applause coming for you in the Facebook windows, some snapping, some gratitude for your work and your wisdom in the chat as well.
Thank you.
Deeply powerful. I was taking notes, and I'm sure others were as well. We're going to move now to David Corfidge, climate activist. David is a 14-year Montclair resident, history teacher, and climate activist. He has been active in the climate movement since 2013. Most recently, he has been involved with the group Extinction Rebellion and was one of the founders of Montclair Climate Action, a new local group dedicated to making Montclair a climate leader by encouraging residents and the township government to take strong action to address the climate crisis. David Corfidge, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it. I'll try to speak slowly. I know when I'm in class, my students always complain I speak too quickly, so hopefully I'll make myself understood. So when I was first approached about this by someone I know in Beyond Policing, I was intrigued because in the course of the usual work I either do with MCA or Extinction Rebellion or other groups I've been in, policing isn't necessarily something that comes up. But in thinking about it, I want to highlight a couple ways in which the work we do could overlap with the kind of work that's being discussed here in terms of social justice work. And one, of course, is the fact that the effects of climate change, which are already here, which are going to just get worse, even if we cut emissions immediately, they would continue to get worse. They've hit disadvantaged communities the most. That's true globally, and it's also true locally and at the state and regional level. There's been a lot of work done on how, for example, the historical effects of redlining have affected everything from heat islands to flooding and so on. So one thing to be aware of is that we, in addressing the effects of climate change, we have to make sure we're targeting the communities that need them the most. And that brings me to the second point, which is to address climate change, it will take a certain amount of resources. And that's where we get to the question of how we're going to spend our money. And I always think that when you're talking about climate change, you want to discuss not only the specific measures, but have a vision for a kind of sustainable society that you want to have to take the specific steps to address climate change issues, but also have in mind a vision for a kind of more just, more sustainable society that will make us happier and more fulfilled, and in general make our society a better place. Generally, when you talk about climate change, they talk about two kinds of things. They talk about adaptation and they talk about mitigation. Adaptation means we know the effects are here already. They're going to get worse. Summers are already hotter and they're going to get worse. So how are we going to adapt to what's coming down the road? And again, that's going to take a certain amount of resources. We'll have to harden our infrastructure. We have to deal with flooding. We have to build microgrids to handle extreme storms, and so on. So there's a variety of things even the township could be thinking about doing to prepare for what's likely to come down the road in terms of adaptation. And then the other big thing that we want to think about is mitigation. How can we change the way our society is structured and our institutions? What can we do as individuals and what can we do as a society to make sure that we are doing what we can to reduce climate change as much as possible? The scientists tell us we have to cut our emissions basically to zero, in half by 2030, and basically to zero by 2050. It's going to take a lot of adjustments. We want to think about how to do that. And some of that will be at the national level and some will be at the state level, but even at the local level, there's things that can be done. So for example, one of the things we need to do is we need to set up programs to help make sure that everyone can take advantage of the sort of adaptation for energy efficiency that we need to do to reduce our energy usage. There's some programs out there, but they tend to, in the past, they seem to have gone to upper income people. And we want to make sure they're widely shared. There's some of that money is available from the state, and there's some from the township. There was a program either this year or last year, I can't remember exactly when, but we're going to have to expand those to make sure everyone has access to those resources so they can take the steps. We can all take the steps we need to take. There's a lot of interesting work going around on financing around how to do that, make financing available to everyone who might need to do those things. Another area we've talked about in Montclair Climate Action is composting, reducing waste and creating a more sort of circular economy. And that again is going to take one of the things that's holding it back now is simply the sort of cost of a system like that. And so we have to think about where we're going to put our resources. And the last thing I would like to mention is there's some talks around transportation, because one of the things we need to do is we need to change our transportation system. And partly everyone talks about electric vehicles, and that's part of it, right? We need to make sure that everyone has access to that sort of electrified transportation and the chargers that you need to do that. We need to make sure that people who are renters around town have access to what they might need in terms of charging if they have those sorts of vehicles. But just as important is we want to have a society where we get people out of their cars. And that could be everything from building the sort of complete streets that Bike Montclair has talked about, Bike Walk Montclair. So we make the township more accessible to bike riders and to pedestrians. And there's a group of us who are talking about public transportation around town. I know people in the South End for years have felt that they're a sort of transportation desert, that they want to make sure that, for example, students can get to the high school more easily, or that people can get to the work more easily from the South End. So even jitneys or shuttles around town, and of course, then making sure we have the kind of town with the sort of local sustainable economy that people will want to get around town into. So even something like transportation is part of this larger vision for the kind of town we want to have. But there's certainly, to adapt to climate change and to mitigate the effects of climate change, there are certain things that even the township can be doing, which we're talking about. And that's how I sort of see climate change in this larger conversation. So I'm going to stop there and head on to the next person. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, David Corfage. I want to recognize a point that was made in the chat that connects your presentation with what Gail shared and perhaps with others that might come up. It's how both presentations talk about removing the barriers that keep people isolated. I think that's a beautiful thought to hold close as we hear the next piece. So next we are going to move to Jenna Meller from New Jersey Harm Reduction Coalition, and we have a video from Jenna for Jenna's presentation. Jenna is currently the executive director at New Jersey Harm Reduction Coalition, which provides direct harm reduction services, advocates for equitable drug policy, and organizes by and with people harmed by overdose, crisis, and war on drugs. Jenna has over 10 years of experience at the intersection of direct service and public policy. Previously, she served as the associate director at Point Source Youth Aid, she served as the associate director at Point Source Youth Aid to Congressman Jerrold Nadler, outreach manager at HIPS, and has advised the New Jersey Department of Health on harm reduction best practices. Jenna recently completed her master's in public affairs at Princeton, focusing on drug and housing policies that promote public health and human dignity. Now here's her presentation. In just a moment.
Mark, am I spotlit?
Do that right now.
Okay, I'm going to be playing a video that Jenna sent us. And please just let me know if people can't hear the audio.
Lily, are you going to share your screen for it?
Am I spotlit? I can't tell.
Yeah, you just have to share. I think you're sharing your screen, right?
We can't see whatever you're showing.
There we go. But the sound's not working, Lily. When you share the screen, you've got to click on the bottom left, share with sound. So you got to unshare, and then you can reshare it with sound.
Sorry, 1 second. Okay, let me know if it doesn't work.
From New Jersey Harm Reduction Coalition. I'm honored to be here with you today by video and look forward to meeting many of you in other spaces and contexts as well after today's presentation. So I wanted to talk about naloxone access in our communities. Naloxone, or brand name Narcan, is the drug that reverses an opioid overdose. It is an incredibly powerful tool to reduce overdose deaths, but only if people have naloxone on them when they witness an overdose. And that means making sure that people who have naloxone are people who are witnessing overdoses. Often that's people who use drugs and our loved ones and our family members and the folks that we're hanging out with. So how does this connect to beyond policing? Well, when we really talk about alternatives to policing, we're talking about what is public safety and what is community well-being that's rooted not in punishment or not in surveillance, but in public safety and well-being. And so the drug war is one of the drivers of racist surveillance practices by policing. As many of you know, New Jersey has a directive by our Attorney General that every police officer must make any drug-related arrests that they can, unless that arrest impedes an ongoing investigation. New Jersey Attorney General directive, also another directive, also says that every overdose death must be investigated as a drug-induced homicide. This means that in our state, the racist war on drugs blocks so many people who use drugs from getting the support that they and we deserve. And so what community naloxone distribution is all about is making sure that the people most likely to use a life-saving medication have access to that medication. So at New Jersey Harm Reduction Coalition, we work with community members like you all, community organizations, churches, faith-based outreach programs, shelters, and most importantly, people who use drugs and people who love people who use drugs, to get naloxone into the hands of as many people as possible. And so this means it's not sitting behind a pharmacy door or a pharmacy cabinet. It's not on a shelf somewhere locked up. It doesn't take a copay. It doesn't take lots of forms. It is easy to get, 5-minute training, and you have this life-saving medication on you. And so this is so important because the war on drugs really makes, we think of police and EMS as the first responders, when really people who use drugs are the first of the first responders. And it's also so important because New Jersey does have rising rates of overdose deaths for all of our residents, and rates of death are rising fastest for Black and Latinx residents. We also know that there's lots of reasons why people might not want to call the police when an overdose has happened. And there's lots of reasons why calling the police can actually decrease safety for people in that moment. And so one of the things we're doing is, why would you have to call the police in response to an overdose if the thing you need, you have access to? And so what we really need your help with is, I mean, in addition to so many things, and I'm sure like today's discussion is like so much that we have to do together. We really could use your help at New Jersey Harm Reduction Coalition with making sure that low barrier access to naloxone is available in your community. Do you want to carry naloxone? Do you want to distribute naloxone to people in your life? Do you want to make sure that an organization that you're part of has and distributes naloxone? We really need as many community ambassadors as possible, because this is not about doctors, this is not about EMS, this is not about public institutions. This is about each of us, one another, showing up and looking out for one another. And while we work to create an anti-racist system of public health and public safety, we also need to show up for people in the moment with the best tools that we have access to. And we're really honored to work together with you on that. So please reach out, stay in touch, ask any questions you have through email, through phone, and I would love to get to know you better. Thank you.
It's a powerful presentation from Jenna Miller, in gratitude for Jenna's work and the opportunity to partner together. We turn now to Cordelia Siporin. Cordelia is the president of the Friends of the Bellevue Avenue Library, a local 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the preservation and support of Montclair's historic Carnegie Library on Bellevue Avenue. She's also the author and cartoonist of the weekly Kids Corner page and Captain Jet Renegade comic strip in the Montclair local newspaper, and a film professor at Fairleigh Dickinson University. Welcome, Cordelia. Thank you so much for your presentation.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. That is wonderful, wonderful event. So basically the main thing that I'm going to talk about right now, it ties in with my role in the newspaper, though not in terms of Captain Jet Renegade, my absurdist space adventure comic. This is really about how to use the resources that we all have as members of a community to raise awareness about issues to make change. Basically, I think that the whole reason why I got connected to Lily and to Montclair Beyond Policing and to this event was because I wrote an article, some weeks ago in the Montclair local newspaper that I work for, but anyone can write to them, and basically just handed the town council their heads because of the awful decision that they had originally been going to make to cut the library budget significantly, that in such a way that would have prevented the Bellevue Avenue Library from reopening. And thankfully, it's actually going to be reopening next week because we were able to reverse that decision through our activism via the newspaper. And it was a double whammy 1-2 punch, because right after my article was published, raising all of the reasons why we need a library, especially in a pandemic, especially, when we have things like remote learning going on and people, on the job search because of all of this mass unemployment that has been the result of this, and the fact that the library gives so many resources to everyone, whether it's like free books and movies and internet access. It's a wonderful pro-social do-gooder organization, and to deprive people of that in a time of need is cruel and terrible. And right after my article, the people at Montclair Beyond Policing contacted me, invited me to this event, and I encouraged them to write an article about what Lily told me on the phone, the fact that not only were they defunding the library, they were increasing the police budget. So Lily and the people at Montclair Beyond Policing wrote an article that was in the next week's paper, decrying the fact that this was the priority, apparently, in the town council's opinion. And so many people, read these articles, and so many people got upset that when they had the budget hearing, there were plenty of people, calling in on their phones and saying, like, what the heck are you doing? And I think it made a difference. It got the Montclair Township Council choked up a little bit and surprised, and they listened, and they not only increased the library budget by $100,000, but they took it from the inflated police budget, which is still too high, in my opinion. And as we have had heard from other people, there are much healthier and better ways of dealing with issues in town than having an overly funded police force. But the point being that anyone can write the local paper at any time. That's a very important tool to have in your back pocket. If ever something is happening that you feel is unjust, there have been times, when I have pulled out my phone on people and said, the local paper would love to hear about this. And then all of a sudden, things that are unjust suddenly get a lot more fair. This is a tool everyone needs to know about, everyone needs to use. Don't be afraid to use it. Another thing that I want everyone to know about and familiarize yourself with, if you can, is a thing called the Open Public Meetings Act. When governing bodies or governing boards meet to make decisions that affect the public, like whether or not to defund the library, they have to announce to the public sorry, that is my dog trying to break into the room, that they're going to make such a decision, and it needs to be clear what that decision is, and the public needs to have a certain amount of advance notice, and everyone needs to know. And actually, if ever this is violated, if ever somebody, either in a town governing board or university or anything that affects the public, if they make a decision without adequate announcement, you can bring this up, you can get them in trouble for it, you can actually get them in legal trouble for it. And this is the way that we actually, this is primarily the reason why the Bellevue Avenue Library still exists today. It is because 10 years ago, when they originally tried to defund and close the library, a member of our group pointed out that the decision to do so was made in violation of the Open Public Meetings Act, and it was reversed. And that's why we have had a library, on the what do you call it, the Upper Montclair, if you'll excuse that phrase, end of town, why we have this historic Carnegie Library, which serves, like I've pointed out in many articles, at least 3 schools within walking distance, multiple senior citizens, and is of course on the National Registry of Historic Places. So if we know the tools that are at our disposal and aren't afraid to be the squeaky wheel, because let's face it, that is really what makes change, getting public awareness via things like the local newspaper, and not allowing decisions made against the public good to be made without their knowledge or consent, and if they are, to fight. And that's why, again, I encourage you to familiarize yourself with the Open Public Meetings Act, and also, of course, to record things with your phone. As we all know, this has literally changed the world. This technology has literally brought us towards a more just society, because this very much is the sunlight that exposes the mildew of our culture, and hopefully will reveal itself to be the disinfectant that we all wish for. So that is basically my spiel, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Cordelia Siporin. I have this dream to see Jet Renegades save a library sometime in the near future, or perhaps break up a meeting that's being held behind closed doors, just to get that plug in there for future strips. I'm going to move now to introduce Phoenix Herring, who's here from Montclair Mutual Aid. Phoenix, she, her, is an artist and organizer with Montclair Mutual Aid since July 2020. Welcome, Phoenix. Thank you for being here.
And I'll be presenting Phoenix's video. So Mark, if you could spotlight me and just let me know when I'm up there.
I can't spotlight you, Lily, if your camera's off, but you can share your screen at any time and you'll be good.
Oh, okay. Can everyone see?
Yes.
Hey, my name is Phoenix, and I've been a member of Montclair Mutual Aid since July of 2020. Thank you to Montclair Beyond Policing for facilitating this conversation, and thank you to all the wonderful organizers for taking time to speak about your work. Before I get started with my pre-recorded message, I just wanted to highlight that I'm not a spokesperson for Montclair Mutual Aid, and all views expressed are my own. Montclair Mutual Aid was founded at the start of the pandemic by a group of neighbors devoted to caring for members of our community throughout the crisis and beyond. Mutual aid is the practice of collective care. It is solidarity, not charity, meaning it upholds the creation of horizontal networks of solidarity rather than waiting for top-down solutions either never come or are never sufficient. Mutual aid has existed since forever, and it has its roots within communities of color providing care and resources to one another in light of government incompetence and total inaction. Mutual aid work has also always been present in Montclair, long before the founding of Montclair Mutual Aid. Many of my neighbors, for example, have engaged in spontaneous practices of collective care, like sharing food or giving rides. These practices of care increased exponentially after Pathmark closed in 2015, leaving those of us living in the Fourth Ward who don't drive with no means of getting groceries unless we either pay for rides, overpriced goods from Whole Foods, or delivery fees from various services. Montclair Mutual Aid, in differentiating itself from other kinds of charity organizations, does not merely want to help those who lack, but strives each day to transform the material conditions in our town. Many in our community were and are struggling to afford food, rent, utility bills, and more before the pandemic. Many are navigating houselessness, substance use disorder, and mental illness. The pandemic's devastation disproportionately impacted the most marginalized and has left many without jobs or stable housing. For many, stimulus checks provided little to no relief if they did in fact receive one. The eviction moratorium, which did not cancel rent, will be ending soon, in addition to unemployment pandemic assistance. While there are many groups in town doing great work alongside us, like the Northeast Earth Coalition, Montclair Moms of Color, the Tenants Organization of Montclair, Montclair Beyond Policing, Tony's Kitchen, a vast portion of our town budget is allocated towards policing when it could be invested into care. Our mutual aid initiatives directly respond to the needs of our community and include the following: community gardening, as pictured here, where we plant and harvest veggies that are donated to Tony's Kitchen, in addition to having lots of fun goofing off and sharing stories. The Little Free Pantry Network, which is a series of outdoor pantries across town that are stocked regularly with non-perishable food items and other essentials. Free food and music events that also usually include toiletries, books, toys, bikes, and much more. Also, menstrual product distribution and toiletry drives, grocery and clean water deliveries with special help from the Newark Water Coalition. We also help out with school lunch delivery, job search support, direct cash assistance, park cleanups, and free arts programming. Mutual aid to me is the understanding that we can come together and act today in our communities to support and empower one another. With mutual aid comes the recognition that the state, which values profit over people, and the systems that cause harm and perpetuate violence cannot be used to heal our communities. Mutual aid is a practice that's dedicated to anti-racism, gender justice, disability justice, anti-capitalism, anti-authoritarianism, the abolition of policing, and the military, and is concerned not only with helping people meet survival needs, although this is an important part of our work, but also with addressing the root causes of harm, disrupting the status quo, and helping people to thrive. The pandemic was, at its onset, a disaster that many of us were unprepared for. Now, as we look to the future, with many COVID-related restrictions being lifted and many attempting to resort to some semblance of normal, it is important to keep our momentum going. Mutual aid is an infrastructure. Mutual aid infrastructure is a foundation upon which we can all continue to build and struggle onwards towards more radical, transformative change within our community. Why would we ever want to return back to normal if normal for so many consisted of precarity and suffering? Thank you.
So well said, appreciated from Phoenix Herring. I just want to share two quick pieces from the chat. Jeff L says, all these presentations are dope. I agree. And Annalise Scherfen continues doing the work of solidifying those points of common interest and focus and shared invest in care. And we are going to move now. We have two more presentations before we get to a chance where we can speak with one another. Two more fabulous presentations. The next is Jeff oh boy, I thought I was going to get this right, Jeff. Jeff Lukowitz. Did I get it?
You got it that time.
All right. So Jeff Lukowitz is here from Brick City Mutual Aid. And Jeff organizes as part of the working group of North New Jersey DSA and is currently involved with 3 projects. Brick City Mutual Aid, Hackensack River Mutual Aid, and the Ramapo Lenape Solidarity Project. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Sorry that all that was such a mouthful. And thank you for Montclair Beyond Policing for sharing the space with us and for everyone's efforts here in their communities and those who are attending to learn more. Following up on the last presentation about mutual aid, it can play an important role within an abolitionist framework. Most people only think of disaster relief or food distribution as the sole function of mutual aid, which is largely when it's in the spotlight and most recognizable. We all know under capitalism and what Ruth Wilson Gilmore calls the politics of organized abandonment, that we are always living under crisis. But I think after more than a year of mutual aid collectives coming together around New Jersey, we can begin to recognize the greater role it plays in base building, in sustaining a movement, in community organization, and sharing of resources and information. A lot of people view abolition in terms of defunding police departments and closing prisons and decriminalizing sex work and the use of drugs and immigration statuses. 100% yes to all of that. And what mutual aid can do is create the generative conditions of support, sustainability, decision-making, community control of resources, and building the needs, meeting the needs of people without the exploitative, dehumanizing, alienating capitalist carceral state, right? Our liberation is collective, and that means it's going to require the collaboration of everyone to participate in direct actions with our neighbors and in our communities. And it's just a matter of, understanding what those direct actions look like. So Brick City Mutual Aid has been working on several small projects or actions which limit community contact with police. In 2019, there were nearly 400 moving violation stops by police per week in Newark alone. So we conducted a small training where several of our members learned how to change their brake lights in their cars. Police pull people over for BS reasons all the time, and brake lights are one of them. And the idea being that knowing how to change your own brake light reduces the chances that you'll have contact with police, that you'll also save a little bit of money because you won't have to go to a mechanic to do something that you now know how to do. And it's a skill that you can learn and share with all your neighbors and loved ones. The same principle goes with New Jersey Harm Reduction Coalition, our partnership with them, who you already heard from. If we can approach drug usage from a standpoint of community care, as opposed to criminalization, we can save lives, reduce police presence, and begin to destigmatize and humanize people in our community. Drug usage in rich neighborhoods by white people isn't criminalized in the same way that working class and non-white neighborhoods are. And while many folks focus on legislative or electoral strategies to fix these issues, mutual aid just says, let's do this shit ourselves. Brick City Mutual Aid heard that out of the hundreds of doses that of naloxone we've distributed, we've already saved at least one life. We're also collaborating with the Democratic Socialists of America's housing justice team and conducting building canvases to let tenants of predatory landlords know their rights as renters. People were receiving eviction notices throughout COVID, totally not cool, while an eviction moratorium was in place, particularly undocumented residents. Our goal would be to organize tenant associations or a Newark-based tenant union so that tenants can fight back against gentrification and protect each other and their housing. Which leads me to the idea that we protect us, right? As much as we can, at least. Newark is home to lots of protests. While the cops there are soft on protests because they know people are watching, it's important that we show that we can keep ourselves safe during uprisings and direct actions. Brick City Mutual Aid has attended over a dozen major actions to provide critical support to people there, make sure people have access to masks and sanitizers, don't faint from heat exhaustion, or suffer from low sugar, to cop watch and so on. And we'll also be conducting martial trainings so that we can help facilitate the execution of direct actions and keep people safe, knowledgeable, and prepared with as little contact with police as possible. And we've also been collaborating with the New Jersey Street Medic team and some other medic groups to try to build on that as well. Decentralized networks of collaboration are what's essential if we want to be able to sustain coming crises and build power beyond our neighborhoods. So when we connect with Newark Water Coalition in Newark about poison water, not just from the pipes, but from the sources in the Passaic River, we find a commonality with the Ramapo Lenape Turtle Clan struggles with the ecological disasters and Superfund sites in Ringwood. We've begun bridging these gaps so that folks who want to find a healing and peaceful space, they can participate in the Muncie Three Sisters Medicine Farm with the Turtle Clan. And Chief Mann can continue to build connections for Indigenous solidarity and land back efforts in Newark. We've connected and collaborated with mutual aid groups in Montclair, Patterson, Jersey City, all the way down to Cape May. So while mutual aid is hyper-local, these networks can build to extend to struggles in Colombia or in Palestine as they fight against oppressive forces there, or Texas when they experience water crises, or California when it's burning. All this goes beyond Brick City Mutual Aid's 300 plus critical deliveries to families in need, many of whom who've been victims of the police state and barred from procuring resources from the state because of immigration status or criminal history or homelessness. It goes beyond our monthly food shares we've conducted at Peter Francisco Park to support the unhoused community. It goes beyond our winter clothes distributions. What these direct actions do is create a culture of community care and responsibility that will need to exist if we want to replace the police state. And lastly, we are the community we serve. So we aren't paternalistic as some nonprofits or religious organizations can be. We don't administer aid, we share it. So members who have needed help looking for resources or needed support in some way share their struggles within the group, and we support each other. Need is not burden. And the material conditions we live under seek to isolate us, but we don't need to struggle alone. Let's unlearn what capitalism and the carceral state has taught us and begin practicing our better world as we fight for it.
Thank you so much, Jeff Lukowitz. Begin practicing our better world as we fight for it. Fabulous. Thank you. We're going to turn now to Prabita Saha. Prabita, she, her, is a North Jersey native and newish resident of Montclair. She joined Montclair Beyond Policing after they hosted a town hall with the mayor and council last year, and has found the organizing work to be a, illuminating window on local government. As an Indian American, she's interested in how communities of color are oppressed and perceive authority differently. She also works with the Abolish ICE New York, New Jersey coalition, which is working to free all immigrants in detention in area jails and shutter the inhumane Agency for Good, and Black Lives Matter Patterson, which is building deep community roots through food justice, medical training, and other mutual aid and education work. Welcome, Prabita Saha. Thank you for presenting.
Thank you, Reverend Anya. I will share my screen, 1 second. Okay. So as Rev Anya said, I'm a member of Montclair Beyond Policing. We're a non-hierarchical abolition group based here in Montclair, formed in direct response to the murder of George Floyd last May. So we are, compared to some of the other groups, the community groups that presented today, we are a newborn baby, only been around for a year. But I kind of want to take you through the journey we've had, because we have a very direct goal in mind. Through the lens of abolition, we are pushing for defunding of the Montclair Police Department in order to create something new. And that new creation would be a crisis response program that's completely isolated from the police, non-armed and community-based, and mostly, to focus on mental health calls. So to get started, if you're, a resident of Montclair or a neighboring town, you may have come out for some of the Black Black Lives Matter protests that occurred last summer. This one in June, I think, drew over 1,000 folks and really centered around anti-policing. And to follow that up, Montclair Beyond Policing had its first town hall last July. At the time, we were joined by the mayor and several town council members who looked at some of, thanks to some interns from the Pressman program, which was supported by a few of the local temples here. They looked at what exactly is the policing situation here in Montclair. And some of the facts we learned were, as folks were already discussing in the chat, we have a monstrous police budget. I was under the impression it was close to 17% of our budget, but as one of our attendees mentioned, it might be even higher, up to 21% when you include all the odds and ends. We learned that our police department is a lot larger. I think on average, we have more than 100 police officers on the force, and that's a lot larger than towns of our scale in New Jersey. And our police department also uses force proportionally a lot more than other departments in our state and in the country. And most of their targets are indeed Black individuals. So we saw some really big percentages. You can see these yourself if you go to the NJ.com force report, or the Pressman interns pulled data from between 2017 and 2020. And really interestingly, they specifically looked at calls for mental health crises. So what they found was a third of the calls that the police responded to in Montclair were indeed mental health based. And of those, 78% were involved Black individuals. So this, this kind of reporting helped hone our focus on mental health needs and how police are, overwhelmingly involved in those. And I wanted to include this story as well, just because another example of, how the town came together in solidarity with, or in solidarity against white supremacy and policing of Black folks. So a year later, Montclair Beyond Policing has kind of taken the town council to task on some of the issues and conversations they started last summer. And, as maybe expected, we haven't seen a lot of activity or openness from our local politicians. So we have been consistent in calling into our twice a month town council meetings to remind them that we need to do something about policing here in Montclair. And we've also been closely tracking the town budget process because, of course, this is our in to making actual change with the police budget. So what we learned through this year, which to be fair, it was an odd year because of the pandemic. But what we learned is that there really isn't much room for community input, community ideas, and conversation around the budget. We consistently were asking when the proposed budget for 2021 would be shared so that members of the public could weigh in. And there was really no clear timeline. It just kind of showed up on the municipal agenda one day. So once it was shared, we started having some conversations with local groups. Cordelia, of course, already kind of covered what happened with the library, but that spurred a lot of action on the community level. And, in terms of the police budget, it actually went up. there was a whole statement about how costs had to be cut, the library budget had to be cut, but the police budget went up. And there were excuses on this because of the body camera as that the state is forcing the police department to get. But there were a lot of miscellaneous unexplained budget items for the police, and it really didn't stand. So I have like a few snapshots of kind of what the conversation has looked like around defunding the police in town. We have we've heard a lot about how the Montclair Police Department is different from other police departments. It's, the members of the police department grew up here in town, they have good relationships, essentially building this narrative that the Montclair Police Department is exceptional and it can't harm the community. And yeah, that's just really counter to the narrative we're seeing everywhere else. And also input that we've gotten from members of our community, everyone from parents to youth to business owners who've had negative interactions with the Montclair Police Department. So yeah, we have very in tune town council when we call in. And here's a little snapshot of, as I was saying, the police budget, how it's gone up, how there was this completely non-transparent other item that we questioned during the town council meetings. And one of the town councilors ended up sending us like a line item breakdown of that other expenses. In the end, this budget was adopted with a few tweaks. The library did get an additional 100,000, and the police budget was cut by, I believe, the price of one armored vehicle. But the whole point of this was that we're trying to lay the ground for a real conversation before the next budget is even framed and proposed and passed. And that is to launch this pilot program that is shaped after many crisis response programs we've seen across the country. Of course, the most well established is the CAHOOTS program in Oregon, which was founded in 1989. And I believe that does use part of the local police budget and town funding. Our members at Montclair Beyond Policing have also recently been talking to members from the Oakland sorry, I have it written down. Oh God. I will.
Anti-Terror Police Project.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry about that. And this is also a crisis response program, entirely community volunteer run, also run on donations that came together quite recently, and it's been so successful that the city itself wants to test a pilot program. So our idea is it's happening elsewhere. Why not Montclair? Obviously, we need to better understand the needs here in Montclair, whether it be in terms of mental health response or disability rights, senior rights, housing crises. So we're really connecting and collaborating with a lot of local groups here. And we also have this petition going around, which is to introduce this idea to people who live in and around Montclair, and also show the town council that it's not just, the dozen members of Montclair Beyond Policing who believe in this and who demand this, but it's a lot bigger than us. And we have a lot of community support and are going to continue building it. So yeah, just to, drop a last note here. the leaders of Montclair, or at least in Montclair government, they still see police as the pillar of community safety. Whereas, we are getting plenty of facts, examples, information from across the country and across the world that is simply not true. Police cause harm across communities. And we are, trying to help Montclair wake up to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabita Saha. A powerful way to close our presentations. We are going to move now to an invitation to breakout groups. I've pasted into the chat the different breakout group options. 1 is Restorative Justice Montclair. 2 is Climate Action. 3 is New Jersey Harm Reduction. 4 is Friends of the Bellevue Avenue Library. And 5 is both mutual aid groups. And if you wish to stay in the main room, you will be then with a group of people from Montclair Beyond Policing. So those are actually 6 options to stay in the main room with Montclair Beyond Policing, or to choose one of the other options. And I see that I actually didn't send that to everyone. I sent it to Lily, who already knows this. I'm gonna work on pasting that back in there. Here we go. All right, 1, Restorative Justice Montclair. 2, Climate Action. 3, New Jersey Harm Reduction. 4, Friends of the Bellevue Avenue Library. 5, both mutual aid groups. 6, Montclair Beyond Policing. I feel like I'm auctioning something. I want to invite you to choose. I believe you'll have that option when Mark Joseph puts breakout.
Yeah, they're actually all set. The only thing is, though, that NJ Harm Reduction I don't think is here for a breakout room today. So I just made 4 rooms, with the main room being for Montclair Beyond Policing. I just posted in the chat right now. So it's everything you said minus NJ Harm Reduction. And the rooms are open for people to join.
All right, we'll go with that.
Do we, the people who are like leading each breakout room, have to choose one ourselves, or does that happen automatically?
No, everybody can choose automatically, but you should go to the one that you ran. So you should go to number 3 for the library one, but you can just click and join.
Thank you. Click where? Has it, am I supposed to see something yet? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
For me,
the
coming up
bottom
in
right.
the-
Oh, yeah, sorry, you go.
For me, it's coming up in the 3 dots at the bottom where it says more, and then it should say breakout rooms.
Oh,
I do not see this.
nor do I.
Depending on what sort of device you're on, wherever you find information on breakout rooms, it should be at the bottom of your screen if you're on a PC or a Mac laptop or desktop. If you don't see that, there will be 3 dots across the bottom, and breakout rooms will be one option there. And if you don't see any of those, Mark will be able to put you where you need to go.
Yes, I am able to do that. So if you tell me where to put you, like for example, Cordelia, I'll put you right now into number 3, so you are good. And Gail, I'll put you right now into number 1, so you are good. So if you just chat me, I can put you in a room, or maybe you're staying for the main room for Montclair Beyond Policing. Perdita, do you want to start maybe taking questions or maybe something like that?
Yeah. Just gonna give, okay, I guess this is our crew. Hey, everyone. All right, I see a few members of Montclair Beyond Policing here, but anyone else? I also
I
see
think Cordelia wanted to go.
Cordelia.
Cordelia, what,
No,
something happened?
It was the wrong room. Somebody else was already like beginning their spiel. Or the other person was in the wrong room. I don't know.
I think it's the right, I know it's the right room. Trevor is from Montclair Beyond Policing. He's in there. And then there's someone named Ruby Cinnamon in there, but maybe Trevor was just talking.
Trevor was saying that it wasn't the Bellevue Avenue Library group, that it was the Montclair Beyond Policing group.
No, he sorry for this. He might just be helping out, but that is the right room. I promise you it's the right room. He might just, because the Montclair Beyond Policing room is this one right here.
Okay, I think he's a little confused then. You might want to drop him a note somehow, but.
Okay, I'll join that room right now with you. Okay,
thank you.
You should be able to join back, right?
Yes, look at that. I have the power.
All right, you join back and I'm going to go in there right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else want to, Jeff or Marielle, you want to introduce yourselves? You know, whether you're neighbors here in Montclair, it'll just help, you know, percolate our discussion a little.
Hi, I'm Marielle, also Mark's wife, so you might hear him in the background. But just here to learn more, a resident of Montclair and a teacher in Newark.
Okay, and maybe Jeff is unable to weigh in right now. That's okay. Yeah, I think, like I said, our biggest task right now is to, we've kind of presented this idea in different forms to the people who can make it happen here in Montclair. But we're hearing a lot more from other groups on what kind of research needs to be done to cater such a program to Montclair. There's, you know, talk of doing an actual study of policing in Montclair, and what the biggest, how people depend on the police and how we can kind of redirect that dependency. But I would love to kind of have this conversation revolve around like what, because mental health is kind of one of the biggest focuses and needs, like what do we think some of the incorrect like notions of mental health here in Montclair are, or like how are we even talking about it enough here in Montclair or in the right way? Yeah, like what kind of conversations have you had around mental health with whether it be, you know, congregations, neighbors, people at the restaurants you go to? I don't know.
I can share. I think in my experiences that people for the most part just feel like Montclair is kind of like a perfect town with no issues. And I think I hear a lot about Montclair being exceptional, and I don't ever hear about like some of the challenges or problems in Montclair. And so a lot of the people I talk to who are neighbors are like, oh, everything's fine. You know, there's no reason to defund the police. There's no reason to join a mutual aid club or mutual aid group or support restorative justice, or honestly, any of them. All those presentations are amazing. So I hear a lot of that. And I think I try to talk to them about what I see happening as well. But I guess a lot of it is who you know and who you interact with on a daily basis. And so I feel like it's a lot of, well, Montclair's awesome. Let's not change anything. And I think it would be so amazing to me if we said, yeah, things are going well for some people, but let's make it go well for everyone. And here's how we could do that. And let's do that. And then we could be the town that we kind of claim we are. So that's kind of what I see. I don't know if anybody else wants to go. That's kind of my take on it though.
Be glad to share. One of the things that we're talking about in our congregation is the intersection of mental health and every other justice initiative that we partner in, especially the work around policing and the work for racial justice and economic justice. And one of the things that we keep coming up with is that in this moment in time, we are deeply aware of how all of our mental health is fragile because of our experience through the pandemic. Everyone experienced those incredible ups and downs and challenges of transformation. And so this might be a time where we really do understand what to be human is to have fragile mental health, and that we need to create structures in our communities that really do support the mental health of all. And to do that is going to be linking mental health resources to other areas of community care. And from my perspective, absolutely creating avenues for mental health responders to engage instead of the police to care for community members who are hurting, who are struggling, who need help. And that's something that we've seen. You shared, Prabita, so many great programs being done across the nation. I think there's no reason for Montclair to not have something like that.
Yeah, and what you said, Rev Anya, is it's not only about responding when it's a crisis, it's stemming that crisis as well. And I didn't get to partake in this, but a few of our members a few weeks ago came together to talk about creating pods and pod mapping. And I was thinking about that when Gail was speaking about relationships in her presentation, because that's all that pod mapping is about. Like, your pod is the people in your life that you trust when some harm has been caused to you, has been inflicted on you, or you yourself have inflicted harm. So before, that trauma turns into a full-blown crisis, these people who don't necessarily have to be your family or friends or colleagues, they can help you, work through these problems. But then there are also structural support systems that our town could be better doing. Defunding the police doesn't just mean that the money has to go only to response programs, but it could be toward like more entrepreneurial grants and better economic support that's equal across the community. Supporting. I went to the disability Pride Walk a few weeks ago, and one of the teens who got up to talk, like, she was talking about how she launched this whole art business that's like really empowered her. So, how are there ways that like Montclair could be supporting those initiatives as well that are self-created by people who have these conditions? So yeah, there are a lot of different ideas there, but just a few. Something else I was going to mention.
I wanted to mention too, Prabita, that I have to bring everybody back in about a minute.
Okay.
Just to let you know, just so we all know. I think we made it 15 minutes instead of 20 for time reasons.
Okay. Yeah, did I talk for like 10 minutes? I looked at the time and I was like, whoa.
I don't know. I was very engaged. I didn't look at the time.
Okay.
I thought you did a great job with the presentation too.
Cool. Thank you. There's a lot to cover.
No, it was awesome. No, I don't know. I thought honestly all the presentations were really amazing, and to me connected so much the idea of like community care and us caring for each other. And I love that whether it's climate, restorative justice, NJ Harm Coalition, everybody was talking about that. And I think that's the right way forward. I really do. I'm gonna bring everybody back right now just so y'all know.
Okay.
And Rev Anya, I made you the spotlight too.
Welcome back. I imagine that was a speed round, but the work doesn't have to stop tonight. The work, the engagement, the relationship, it doesn't have to stop tonight. I hope you had what is time for engaging enough so that you can continue. So I want to invite you, in one moment, I'm going to invite Lily to speak and to close us out. But as Lily shares, I want to invite you to write into the chat what you're thinking about. So maybe that one thing that you're taking with you, whether it is something new that you learned or something that is just grabbing you right now and calling you and telling you, I need to work on this, or if it's a question, a deep question that you have been sitting with as the presenters have shared, put it into the chat. I want to invite everyone, if you can come up with a few words just so that we can hear from everyone before we conclude. And of course you can pass if you are moved. And Lily, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Raivanya, and thank you for your wonderful moderating today. I want to take a minute on behalf of Montclair Beyond Policing to extend our deep appreciation and solidarity to all the brilliant organizers and advocates who presented today, and to everyone working to build a better world in the crevices of this one. Our first town hall last summer, as Prabita discussed at length, was organized amid a nationwide and global uprising against white supremacy. Protesters rallied against the racist and anti-poor state violence that killed George Floyd in Minneapolis, Breonna Taylor in Louisville, and so many more. Generations of austerity politics have given us a shattered welfare state and widespread dispossession on the one hand, and on the other, a massive, extravagantly funded prison and policing system to punish and control the dispossessed. After the police murder of George Floyd, organizers drew on decades of Black feminist abolitionist work to demand the defunding of the police, including in Montclair. In the year that's followed, the establishment has closed ranks and tried to turn protesters' demands on their head. Contrary to popular belief, police spending has increased around the country, often in the name of reform, which historically has been a growth model for policing. I'm going to repeat that part because it's important. Reform has historically been a growth model for policing. At the same time, spiraling economic despair, houselessness, mental illness, and mental health crises, and isolation have driven up the rate of reported violence in major cities this year. In short, we've seen more violence and just as much or more police. So what this tells us is what we've always known. Policing doesn't prevent violence. Bizarrely, police boosters have pointed to these failures to call for yet more policing. And most perversely of all, politicians have co-opted George Floyd's name for a piece of legislation that would direct more funding to police departments. Montclair Beyond Policing is opposed to these recuperation efforts. We organized this forum to lift up the work of community members who know that safety and flourishing are built from the ground up through long-term investment in community. Our presenters are doing the kind of work that can prevent and intervene in violence and harm without causing more. We stand in solidarity with neighbors doing deep anti-violence work like Black Lives Matter Patterson and Newark's community street violence response teams. As abolitionist Mariame Kaba says, we need 1 million experiments, and we need more of us doing this work. So if you're watching this event, reach out to the presenters whose work you want to support, attend some meetings, offer your specific skills and capacities. So maybe you're a great graphic designer or writer or speaker. Maybe you have a ton of energy for distribution runs. Maybe you have access to free photocopying, or you're just somebody who knows your neighbors or the people in your building really well and you understand their needs. If you're part of this community, you're needed by this community. We've put together a digital packet of resources and links from our presenters that can help you get connected with the work. And of course, you can reach out to any of us on social media. I will end by quoting Mariam Kaba again. Nothing that we do that's worthwhile is done alone. We hope to see you. And I'm going to present the link for the packet of resources now.
We began together with a shared breath. I want to invite you to close that way as well. If we can breathe in together and breathe out. If you're part of this community, you're needed by this community. May you be well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
This was really awesome. Let's do this again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all. And let's definitely do this again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Be restored.
Thanks, everyone. That was fantastic.
Lily, do you want me to close the Zoom?
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thank
All
you
right.
again, everyone.
Thanks again. So we'll see everybody at 6. Get up, walk around, and we'll reconvene at 6.